In this TaxSlayer Pro training video, we're going to go over the top 10 rejects and how to fix them. Number 1, reject code what we term 504, reject code 504. Each dependent social security number and the corresponding dependent name that has a value on line 6C2 of the return must match the social security number and name control in the e-file database. This rejection often occurs when the name or social security number for the dependent is either incorrect or doesn't match what's on file with the IRS. This is common for a social security number mismatch, and typically the social security number is just a transposed number that causes the rejection. The IRS matches the first 4 letters of the last name, which is typically the third name on the social security card, with the social security number. So try this first. Get your client's dependent's social security cards and then follow these steps to make sure that the information was entered correctly into the program. Open the tax return in TaxSlayer Pro and select Personal Information. Select the Dependents and Qualifying Children menu, and at the Edit Dependent Information window, select or highlight a dependent and then click the Edit button. Check the entries in the Dependent Information menu, making sure that the dependent's name and social security number exactly matches the information on his or her social security card. If the information is wrong, correct it in the program. Repeat the above steps for each dependent. After all the corrections are made, exit to the Receipt menu, exit to the TaxSlayer Pro main menu, select e-file returns, select Transmit Electronic Returns, and add the client to the e-file table. Retransmit the return. If you verified the dependent's name and social security number and you found no errors, and the return still rejects, unfortunately, you're going to need to file a paper return. If you can't resolve the rejection, enter the IRS rejection code in the IRS Error Reject Code, or the ERC field, in Form 8948. This form is paper filing exceptions, and then paper file the return. 8948 is found in the Miscellaneous Forms menu on the client's 1040 screen. Number 2, reject code 902. The taxpayer's taxpayer identification number in the return header must not be the same as a taxpayer identification number of a previously accepted electronic return for the return type and tax period indicated in the tax return. In other words, your client's taxpayer identification number, or TIN, cannot be used more than once. Possible causes for this rejection include someone else filing a tax return using your client's social security number, a return having been filed with your client's SSN as belonging to a taxpayer or spouse, or your client having been claimed as a dependent on another return. This reject can also occur when the social security or taxpayer identification number has been entered incorrectly. Also, check your office records to make certain that you haven't already filed the return and received an accepted acknowledgement from the IRS. If all other possibilities have been exhausted, your client may be the victim of identity theft. Try this first. Get a copy of your client's social security card and then follow these steps to make sure that the personal information was entered correctly into the tax program. Open the return in TaxSlayer Pro and select Personal Information. Select the Name and Address menu. Double-check the client's name and social security number entries in the menu, making sure that the client's name and social security number exactly matches the information on his or her social security card. If the information is wrong, correct it. Have your client check with a spouse or another family member that may have possibly filed a tax return on his or her behalf. If no return's been filed, proceed to the next step. Your client may wish to call the Social Security Administration at 1-800-772-1213 to verify his or her Social Security number, date of birth, and name. If any of the information differs from what was entered on the return, change the information in TaxSlayer to reflect the Social Security Administration's information, and then refile the return. Otherwise, if your client has verified that the information is correct, proceed to the next step. At this point, you and your client will need to mail a paper return. If you believe someone else has used your client's Social Security number on a tax return, have your client call the IRS Identity Theft Hotline at 1-800-908-4490. Number 3. Reject code SEIC F1040-501. Each qualifying child name control that has a value on Schedule EIC, Line 1, and qualifying child Social Security number that has a value on Line 2 must match that in the e-file database. What this means is the Social Security number or the name of a qualifying child on Schedule EIC doesn't match what's in the IRS Master File. Either the child's name or Social Security number is incorrect in TaxSlayer personal information, or the IRS information is incorrect. Because this information generally pulls to the Schedule EIC from the dependent's data, check the entries in the Dependent Information menu, making sure that the dependent's name and Social Security number exactly matches the information on his or her Social Security card. Recent changes in a client's particular Social Security information may not have yet been incorporated into the IRS Master File. The taxpayer can contact the SSA to determine what name and Social Security number are on file there, or the taxpayer can contact the IRS to determine what information the IRS expects to see. Generally, unless this reject can be resolved, EIC can't be claimed if the return is electronically filed. Your client will have to mail in a hard copy of the tax return. Number 4. Reject 507. The dependent Social Security number on line 6C2 of the return was used as a dependent Social Security number in a previously filed tax return for the same tax period. In other words, someone has already filed a return listing this person as a dependent. You're not going to be able to electronically file the return with this dependent listed on the tax return. If the taxpayer believes that this reject is in error, you can leave the rejected dependent on the return and mail a paper return. Number 5. Reject 500. The primary Social Security number and name in the return header must match the e-file database. This is another reject for the mismatch for the name and Social Security number, but in this case, it's for the taxpayer. You'll need to correct this reject by verifying the name and the Social Security number with the taxpayer's Social Security card. If the data matches exactly as it was typed, then have the taxpayer contact the Social Security Administration to get the information corrected in their system. This could possibly take up to 2 weeks to update. The taxpayer can contact the SSA at 1-800-772-1213. In regard to this reject or any of the previous rejects that state the name doesn't match the IRS Master Files, below are a list of name conventions that might help you match what the IRS has in their master files. All names are purely fictional examples. So in other words, Samuel E. Dogwood, we would use his first name as Samuel, middle initial E, last name Dogwood. Paul McDouglas, no middle initial, first name Paul, last name McDouglas. Tam Quan Tran, first name Tam, middle initial Q, last name Tran. Van, Vaughn, Vander, Al, El, Abu, D, Del, D, and Dilla are considered part of the last name. In other words, Heidi J. Van Hedrick. Her first name would be Heidi, middle initial J, last name Van Hedrick. Felix de la Quinta. First name Felix, last name de la Quinta. A hyphen is sometimes used when there are two last names. Sarah S. Smith Thomas, first name Sarah, middle initial S, and her last name would be listed as Smith Thomas. Little more help with last names. When two Hispanic names are involved, use the first last name, which is the father's family name. In some cases, there are three names shown on a Social Security card, and the taxpayer has no middle name. You'll want to ask if the second name is the father's family name. For example, Donna Maria Martinez Gonzalez, first name Donna, middle initial M, last name would be listed on the return as Martinez Gonzalez. Another example, Pedro Morales Moreno, first name Pedro, last name Morales Moreno. Another example, Maria Garza y Lopez, first name Maria, last name Garza y Lopez. Reject code number 6 of the 10 most common reject codes. 502. In Form W-2, line B, the employer EIN must match data in the e-file database. Again, this is another data mismatch, but this one is for the employer listed on the W-2. You'll want to verify the employer ID number entered on the W-2 against the actual document that was supplied by the taxpayer. If the information is incorrect, you'll want to access the client's TaxSlayer W-2 menu and enter the correct information. Then, resubmit the e-file. If the information matches the actual document, have the taxpayer contact the issuer of the W-2 to verify that the employer identification number listed is the correct number. Reject code number 7 on the top 10 list. Reject 506. Each qualifying child's Social Security number that has a value on Schedule EIC Line 2 must not be equal to another qualifying child's Social Security number on another accepted return for the same tax year. You'll also see this reject along with Reject 507, where the dependent Social Security number was already used on a previously filed return. Somebody has already filed a return claiming this Social Security number for the Earned Income Credit. The taxpayer must remove the dependent as a qualifying child for EIC in order for the return to be eligible for electronic filing. If the taxpayer believes that this reject is in error, leave the dependent listed for the qualifying child and mail a paper return. Reject code number 8 on the top 10 list. Reject code 503. The spouse's Social Security number and name in the return header must match the e-file database. In other words, this rejection occurs when the last name or Social Security number for the secondary taxpayer, who is the second person listed as a spouse on a joint return, is either incorrect or doesn't match what's on file with the IRS. Sometimes a newly married spouse might not have updated her information with the Social Security Administration. Try this first to fix the return. Get the secondary taxpayer's Social Security card and then follow these steps to make sure that the information was entered correctly. Open the return in TaxSlayer Pro, select Personal Information, select the Name and Address menu. In the Spouse's Information area, make sure that both the name and the Social Security number exactly match the information found on the Social Security card. If the information is wrong, correct it. Retransmit the corrected tax return. If you've verified that the information you entered into TaxSlayer exactly matches the spouse's Social Security card, the next step is to have your client call the Social Security Administration at 1-800-772-1213 to verify that the SSA's records are correct. Remember, the IRS gets their information from the Social Security Administration. Correct Social Security Administration records will prevent the same reject next year. In the meantime, the best option for your client is to file a paper return, because the tax return will continue to get rejected until the mismatch is fixed at the Social Security Administration, which can take 4 to 6 weeks or even longer. Reject number 9. Reject code IND-046. Form 8862 must be present in the return. The e-file database indicates that the taxpayer must file Form 8862 to claim earned income credit after disallowance. In other words, Form 8862 is missing from the tax return and is required for the earned income credit. If you think that the taxpayer has not had EIC disallowed previously and the reject is an error, have the taxpayer contact the IRS for more information about the rejection. To correct this reject, open the return in TaxSlayer Pro and select Miscellaneous Forms. Select option number 10, Information to claim EIC after disallowance. Answer all questions in the Form 8862 menu, add the return to the e-file table, and retransmit the corrected tax return. And finally, reject code number 10. IND-181, the primary taxpayer did not enter a valid Identity Protection Personal Identification Number, or IPPIN. Please visit the website www.irs.gov/get-an-IPPIN for further information and resubmit your return with the correct number. The taxpayer or spouse did not submit an Identity Protection Personal Identification Number, or IPPIN, or the number that he or she entered is invalid or incorrect. To correct this reject, you're going to want to open the tax return in TaxSlayer Pro and select Personal Information. Select option number 5, Other Categories. Select option 13, Taxpayer's Identity Protection PIN, and if necessary, select option 14, Spouse's Identity Protection PIN. Enter the correct PIN for each. So this was our recap of the top 10 rejects for tax year 2014 and how to fix them. Thanks for watching.